Because of why I search the deep through endless nights, no time to sleep. The call inside I can't deny. I'll find the light because of why.
Hey everyone, and welcome. You know, when you think of Sweden, a couple of things probably pop into your head. IKEA, maybe, and really high taxes. Well, today we're digging into the taxes. We are going to break down exactly why they're so high, and trust me, the answer is way more interesting than you might think.
So let's just get right to it. Why are Swedish taxes so incredibly high? It seems like a simple question, right? But the answer is really complex. It's not just about paying for stuff. It's about how the entire system is built in a history of social trust that goes back, well, centuries. To really get it, we've got to peel this thing back like an onion, layer by layer. So first, let's just get a baseline. How high are we actually talking about here?
Okay, here is the big number. In 2021, Sweden's total tax revenue was 42.6% of its entire GDP, its gross domestic product. That is a massive slice of the whole economic pie.
But, you know, a number like that doesn't mean much without some context. So look at this. At 42.6%, Sweden is just way, way higher than the United States and well above the average for other developed countries. This is not a small gap, folks. This is a fundamentally different philosophy on how to fund a country, which brings us to the most obvious question: what on earth are Swedes getting for all that money? And that brings us to the first, simplest layer of our onion, the straightforward deal. You pay taxes, you get services. So those high taxes, they fund an incredibly wide social safety net. We're talking about things like universal health care for everyone, higher education that's completely tuition-free, really generous paid parental leave, subsidized child and elderly care, and strong support systems for when you get sick or, lose your job. Basically, the government handles a lot of the big life expenses that in other countries are left up to you or your boss. That's the simple answer. But that doesn't explain how they actually collect enough money to pay for all of it. And for that, we need to go a layer deeper into the tax recipe. See, it's not just about what you're paying for. It's about how you design the system to actually bring in all that cash. And this is absolutely crucial to understand. You cannot pay for a system this huge by only taxing the rich. It's just not possible. There isn't enough money. Instead, the Swedish model is built on a really broad tax base. That means almost everyone contributes in a big way. The two main pillars are high taxes on labor, so what you earn, and high taxes on consumption, what you buy. Now let's look at the labor side for a sec, because this number might actually surprise you. On top of what an employee is paid, their employer pays an additional 31.42% in Social Security contributions. It's a huge and kind of hidden part of the tax on your work. And this is where it gets really interesting. That money isn't just going into a big black hole. It's earmarked for specific things. You can see it right here. Over 10% goes straight to retirement pensions. Another 3.5% to health insurance, 2.6% to that parental leave we just talked about. There is a very clear, visible line connecting this specific tax to those specific benefits. So here's the bigger picture of that tax recipe. Sweden puts a heavy, heavy burden on labor and consumption, what everyday people earn and spend. But on the flip side, the corporate income tax is pretty average. And get this is the real shocker. Sweden has zero, that's right, zero inheritance tax or wealth tax. The whole system is designed to tax the flow of money through the economy, not piles of money that are just sitting there. Which, of course, leaves one giant question: why do people go along with this? And that brings us to the deepest and maybe the most fascinating layer of the whole thing. The reason people are willing to pay these taxes is rooted in centuries of history and a really unique relationship between the Swedish people and their government. You see, this high-tax society didn't just pop up in the last century. Believe it or not, historians trace the foundations all the way back to the 1500s. That's when the Swedish state started building a very direct and very detailed relationship with its citizens. Take a look at this. This is a cadastral map from 1635. Now, this wasn't just a pretty drawing of the countryside. This was data.
The government meticulously recorded who owned what land and what it could produce, all to make sure that taxes were based on a person's actual ability to pay. From the very beginning, it was seen as fair and evidence-based, and that started to build a foundation of trust.
And that sense of fairness helped create something political scientists call a fiscal contract. It's basically an unspoken deal between the people and the government. People agree to pay their taxes because they trust the state to deliver on its end of the bargain, providing security, roads, and law and order. And in Sweden, because the state had this direct relationship with its people for so long, that contract became unusually strong.
Now, of course, the giant welfare state we see today is a more modern invention. You can see on this timeline how the tax-to-GDP ratio just exploded in the 20th century. It went from about 10% in the 1930s to a peak of over 50% by the 1980s. This is when that old historical contract was basically scaled up to fund the modern system.
Which brings us all the way to today. Okay, so those historical foundations are really strong, but the world is a different place now. The big question is that centuries-old bargain still a good deal? For a lot of Swedes, the answer is still a definite yes. The argument here is that pooling money through taxes is just the most efficient way to pay for big shared things like healthcare and roads. It's a really pragmatic take on that social contract. But there's a growing feeling on the other side. This captures that sense of frustration you hear more and more, that the quality of the services just isn't keeping up with how much people are paying. People are starting to ask, hey, am I still getting good value for my money? And that gets us to the core debates happening in Sweden right now. People are asking tough questions. Are these high taxes on work making people less motivated? Can the healthcare system keep up with what everyone expects? Is it really fair to tax labor so heavily while capital and inheritance aren't taxed at all? It all boils down to one fundamental question. Does the system still deliver on its promise? So there you have it. The answer to why Swedish taxes are so high isn't just one thing. It's all three layers of that onion we peeled back. It's high taxes for a huge range of services, paid for by a broad system that taxes labor and consumption heavily, all built on a deep history of social trust. A trust that is now being seriously tested. And in the end, the whole Swedish model makes us face a much bigger question, one that every country has to figure out for itself. What is the right price to pay for the kind of society you want to live in? And there really is no single correct answer to that. So I'd love to know what you think. Is the Swedish model something to aim for, or is it a warning? What do you think is the right balance between what we pay as individuals and what we get as a community? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And hey, if you found this explainer interesting, do me a favor and hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more deep dives. Thanks so much for watching.